as a Jet fan and looking around the AFC East, feeling a little comfort that Tua is in the bottom half of the league. And Mac Jones, again, still in that tier, but still pretty far down there at 23, as, these are the guys you're going to be regularly competing against, pending that Tua can stay healthy. He feels like a really interesting kind of, pivot player for a lot of people's perspective. Did you get the sense in your conversations, speaking to Tua, that is there any confidence that this guy can stay healthy with any consistency? And then with Mac, does this kind of feel like make or break year with him for New England? Because really after this year, they kind of decide if they're going to have to pay him or not. So two AFC East teams with sort of question marks and like middle of the road options.
So there's no reason that anyone would be betting on Tua to make it through a season. He has to prove that. If he does, good for him. I mean, I think people are rooting for him just from a health standpoint with the risks that he's taking now, just coming back and playing with those concussions. So, but there's no reason to think that he's going to suddenly hold up. And I think he was very heavily tier 3. I mean, he was very, very heavily tier 3. People aren't giving him, part of the discussion, if you read the piece, is like, how much credit should you give somebody like Tua, who had a really tough situation early in his career? It wasn't set up very well for him. But then, so people are down on him. Then you get good receivers and you get good play caller, and now he plays better, but you give the credit to those other things, right? How much should he get? I think the answer to that is some, because he's a very accurate passer when the play goes according to plan. Very accurate. And accuracy is the number one thing you probably want in a passer. But there's also a feeling that if it breaks down and he gets knocked around, his timing is off, that a lot of it kind of goes by the wayside. So that it has to be really kind of drawn up for him in a favorable way for it to look smooth. Whereas some of these other guys who are in the higher tiers, not only are they good when the play works, but they can create some more things on their own. And that could be missing from Tua. He's not going to run around and make something happen, and if he does, you're worried he's going to get hit. Mac Jones, I think the expectation is that maybe he goes back to what his rookie season was. Now, still not great weaponry there. It's not a great situation. It's just not as bad of a situation as it was last year. So I don't think anybody feels like the ceiling is very high for him. I mean, a lot of people kind of feel like, could he be maybe a Kirk Cousins type of player? And if you are, you can get paid. Daniel Jones just got $40 million a year, which isn't what it used to be, but I think it's number 11 among quarterbacks in annual average pay. Would you really see the Patriots do that if Mac Jones is just a tier 3 quarterback after this year? I don't know that I believe they would go that high. They may pick up the option, and buy some time at a reasonable price. That would probably make sense. That's probably what the Giants should have done with Daniel Jones in retrospect. But I don't think there's a huge belief that he's going to, jump into the top 2 tiers.
Yeah, I think there's just physically some limitations there. And as you said, the weapons in New England just still leave a lot to be desired. And then, looking back in this top 5, and I'm looking at the gap now between Rodgers and Allen, who he shares a division with now. Not, crazy. Allen, 44 tier 1 votes, 6 tier 2 votes. I'm assuming this didn't come through too much in too many of your conversations. It did feel like with the turnovers, there might have been a mild touch of some regression from Josh Allen. I might be biased in saying that because the Jets defense played very well against him in both games last year, which from a Jet fan perspective gives a little more confidence going against that. What is the sentiment about Allen right now? Last year he didn't get himself into this Burrow or Mahomes level, but still a cushion ahead of Rodgers at number 4 and ahead of Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts, a guy who got to the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, I think it's that his upward momentum has slowed. It's been a meteoric rise for him, and really a consistent rise. He's the only guy who's been in quarterback tiers at least 5 years who improved after his second, third, and fourth times in here. So he improved from last year on his number as people saw it again. But I think the rate of improvement has slowed, and Joe Burrow improved more and passed him. I don't think there's really big concerns about Josh Allen. I think he's established himself as a top quarterback. There's certainly some things he can get better as a decision maker and learning to when to kind of give up on a play and when to protect his body and those sorts of things. But everybody would still love to have him as their quarterback. He's going to improve, 29 teams in the league or whatever it is, right? So he's still in very high regard.
One of the interesting segments of your part about Aaron Rodgers that I hadn't seen mentioned anywhere else is the volume of games he's going to play on turf. So last year he played 4 games. An executive said this year he's going to play 14 games on turf, which with some of the stuff that you see traditionally from Hackett's system, what kind of pounding is that going to have on his lower body? It'll be interesting did that comment surprise you? And then 2, from my perspective, we've heard a lot about how the Jets schedule in many ways is actually incredibly friendly this year. And I do think in some ways it is. They effectively have 10 home games because they have the extra one and they play the Giants in an away game in their building. They're the only AFC East team who doesn't have to fly to London. And they don't have a lot of cross-country travel, I think in the first 10 or 11 weeks of the year. The turf one is interesting. I haven't heard that before. Did that comment surprise you? And what are your thoughts about that with Rodgers reunited with Hackett going into this season?
It did kind of surprise me. So basically, I do most of the polling of all the people is kind of done by the middle of June, and then a lot of the conversations are done by then too. But then they resume after I come back from vacation, and it was actually might have even been the night before publication. I was just kind of making a couple extra calls, seeing if I could improve the analysis on a couple guys. And I wasn't even seeking anything on Rodgers. We were talking about somebody else, but then we were going through it, and I circled back to Rodgers, and somebody mentioned that, and I thought, wow. I actually called it up on my screen while we were talking to count them. I was like, that